webinar. We have been having very good presentations since morning, a lot of good discussions. And I'm glad that we have such good panelists. Even the last panel, though it is the last panel, but we have very good presenters. And our first presenter in the panel is a joint paper by Dr. Sabu Thomas and Dr. Manoj Kumar. And as I understand, Dr. Sabu's internet connection is not stable because there's a lot of rain is happening, and so probably Dr. Manoj will be presenting. And Dr. Sabu Thomas is an assistant professor in politics at Government Brennan College, Thalassery, Kerala, and Dr. Manoj Kumar is an assistant professor in politics, Government College, Kottayam, Kerala. And they'll be speaking on financing connectivity and the rationale of AIIB. Over to you, Dr. Manoj. We can't hear you, Dr. Manoj. There's some connection problem. Are you going to check your connection so we can go to the...
I would request Dr. Manoj to please check whether the permissions for audio are given in the mobile or computer. I think the permission for microphone is not given. That's why we are unable to hear him.
I think we'll move on to the next speaker first and wait for them to set their, internet connections. The next speaker we have is Miss Hindu Sanskriti Karki. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in international politics at Fudan University, Shanghai. Her research interests include South Asia geopolitics, small powers, and the security perplexities in the international politics. Over to you, Miss Hindu Karki. Is she there? Hello.
You can start your presentation, Ms. Hindu.
I think she can't hear us.
No, I requested to turn on the video and mic, but
okay. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, now you are audible. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Hi, thank you, Professor, for the invitation and, of course, the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm going to present a part of my thesis. And since it's in recent development, so if you have any comments or questions, you can always provide me with that. So I'd like to first share my slide. I just received a message that you've disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, please share again.
Okay. Is it working?
Not yet. Please share it because nothing is visible here.
Okay, just a sec, let me try again. Okay.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, just a sec, let me. There. So far, like since the morning, we've been talking about, whenever we talk about South Asia and of course, China, there are a lot of issues and a lot of these concepts comes from either threat or conflict or tensions. So seldom do the debate actually try to overcome these things and try to identify factors that can actually lead these countries to cooperate. So in this regard, today I'll be talking from a theoretical perspective on if there's a possibility to overcome the security myopia if countries are actually seeking to promote the triangulated economic cooperation between Nepal, India, and China. So just to give you a brief outline of my presentation. So first, I'll be talking about the current IR theories that are dominant in defining the South Asian structure, and how cooperation has been contextualized by different theorists. So here I will just be using structural realism and its assumption, and of course the concept of security dilemma. The second section that I'll be talking about is the two major factors, that is the power asymmetry and the historical anecdotes that actually enhances security dilemma. And then why, because of this, there is still a limitation to cooperation among these states. Then I would like to introduce a newer perspective where I believe that countries are actually not seeking survival. They're actually seeking autonomy, which is the independent act of making political and economic decision-making. And there I would like to introduce theory of economic interdependence, a little bit of liberal perspective, and the possibilities of cooperation. And at the end, there will be certain prime areas of consideration. So theory of structural realism, I'm sure most of you are acquainted with the theory. However, the theory actually draws its trances from classical realist and neoclassical realist. And it basically emphasizes on 5 major assumptions. The first is the international system it consists of independent political units, which are states, and there are no central authority above them, which is why it is anarchic in nature. Now, if you Google the meaning of anarchic, you will find that it means it's lawlessness and it's chaotic. So when such is a situation, they argue that all state would seek survival as an ultimate goal. And when states try to seek survival, they would want to defend themselves. So they propose that there are 2 options. One is either you try to enhance your internal capability, or second is you try to find an ally who is stronger than your neighbor or your threat. And this actually leads to the creation of the concept called security dilemma, because you don't trust each other and there's uncertainty regarding if your neighboring state's enhancement of military capabilities is actually intended to attack you. So there's these kind of cynical views. However, they also argue that there exist structural predicaments which actually restricts the behavior of the states, and this is defined as the possession and distribution of capabilities, which is actually the power. So Kenneth Walls defines that distribution of capability is actually the possession of economic power, political power, technological power, your access to resources. So these are the factors that restricts your decision making. And I think that this theory has been dominantly used by the IR scholars whenever they define South Asia and their relationship with the extra-regional power, China. So let me enhance a little bit on security dilemma, because Berry Buzan, she clearly says that whenever countries are geographically connected, the chances of security dilemma is quite evident. And in fact, it is very stronger. And most of us, we've read Kautilya, his Arthasastra, and Hertz, when they both talk about humanity, they clearly say that no one can be trusted. And in South Asian region, internally, you can see that this philosophy is very dominant. And of course, with China, it gets like more enhanced, because you're very anxious that the other state action is actually intended to harm your sovereignty and national interest. And when it comes to South Asia, there are 2 factors. I mean, not only South Asia, but let's even conclude like South Asia and China. There are 2 major factors what enhances this security dilemma. One is the power asymmetry, and the second is the historical anecdotes. So I've just come up with this table where I have taken the demographic capability, economic, military, and international engagement. I'm quite afraid that you cannot see the labels of the country. So to just let me explain you, the first is for China, the second is for India, and the third is for Nepal. So when you try to compare the country based on these indicators, and when you try to rank them, you can see that China tops the list, followed by India and Nepal. And when you look at Nepal's position, you can see that the difference is quite high when it comes to every aspect, like every indicators. But when you compare India and China, you can see that most of the difference lies in the economic capability. And of course, like when it comes to military expenditure, yes, but when you look at the militarization index, India ranks 4th. So these are the different power asymmetry, which gives these countries certain leverage to make independent decisions. And of course, Joel Goldman, he argues that because of this uneven distribution of power, there's always some level of tension between these states, which is why their nature is very conflictual. Now, what further enhances this is the historical anecdotes, because we know that somehow history tries to make your perception. It helps develop perception. The integration of Tibet, the integration of the state of Sikkim, and there was China's steady military engagement with Pakistan after the war in 1962 with India, Nepal's willingness to enhance its military engagement with China, and somehow there was a backlash with an embargo by India. There are several border disputes, and even now, I mean, Nepal-India, I mean, it's all over news that we are still disputing over border. Nepal-China has minor border disputes, and then it comes to India-China. And then there are certain arbitrary sanctions, there are trade-off and declaration that has been made by all of these countries questioning or threatening the sovereignty and national interest. And then there's India's military engagement with the US, which leads China to fear to some extent. So according to scholars, all these factors actually pushes the security dilemma and the threat perception among these countries, which actually limits cooperation. Now, let us look at this. They define that international anarchy, like international system is anarchical, therefore there is competition. And even when there is common interest, states would not want to cooperate. And why is because there are two major concerns. One is cheating. They always fear that one would defect. The second is they fear about the relative achievements of gain. For example, like India and China, if they cooperate, then there's a fear that because of this cooperation, if China gains, then maybe this will allow China to enhance its position. So there are these kinds of cynical views. And further, Greco, he argues that countries are more concerned about their position in this international system. So even if they have to let go their absolute gain, and instead it allows the other countries to not enhance its position, then they would be willing to do that. So I think the existence of these kind of cynical views actually disrupts cooperation among these states, because we can see in media, of course, in like statements of different political scientists, when they argue from these perspectives, somehow these also impacts the foreign policy making. And now in the second session, I would like to provide an argument where I discuss like how can we actually overcome this security notion that is so deeply engraved inside our head. So first, just to provide a little bit critique to structural realism, I mean the structural idea of threat and notion. I mean, they argue that all these structural, impediments, all these powers that we discussed before, they restrict your behavior. But I mean, sometimes when national interests are at stakes, countries do not consider these systematic restrictions. For example, if you look at India and Pakistan, they both denied to sign the non-proliferation treaty because although their relationship with the US was at stake, because national interest actually took over these systematic restrictions. Now, the second is, can survival be the ultimate goal of the units in the system? Because this threat notion is very dominant. I mean, we've heard the previous speakers like talking all about threat. And whenever there's threat, you think that your survival is in jeopardy. But do we actually think that Nepal, China, and India are actually struggling to survive? Because in today's context, there are so many platforms that actually ensures the safety of the states. So when the safety margin widens, country would actually want to perceive their secondary goals. And it is not important for you to be militarily equipped to achieve those secondary goals. So here what I argue is that countries try to perceive autonomy, the act of independent political and economic decision-making, and which can actually be gained if you try to achieve more economic power. And that is where these three countries have common interest in. And this is a little bit overview on the liberal perspective on cooperation. Because from a liberal perspective, if you see, they argue that it is not necessary for countries to perceive each other as enemies. Because when we perceive each other as enemy, we always think that there exists threat. But instead, they argue we can see each other as partner. And when there is partnership, then you can think about ways that you can connect to the other partner to pacify your domestic interest. Now, the second is there are existence of international institutions, Because right now, China and India, they're both aiming to become a responsible global power. And when such is a situation, they would not want to defect when it comes to cooperation among these three nations, or also in their diplomatic relationship with Nepal. So when such is the case, there are international institutions that if they defect will actually punish them to some extent. And the other is states do not try to states are not so much concerned about the relative gain, but they're actually concerned about the absolute gains. I mean, look at the relationship between Nepal, India, and China. I mean, if Nepal actually trades with India, can Nepal deny trading with India because it thinks that through that trade, India would gain more? Or rather, Nepal will think that through trade with India, it will actually benefit Nepal and its economy. So those are the things that we need to outweigh, these threat paradigms. And the other aspect is Thomas Schelling. He says that today military weapons and nuclear weapons have actually become a deterrent, because we also saw that despite so many escalated front lines between, of course, Pakistan and India, and of course, China and India, and now with US and China, I mean, they would be very much hesitant to use these nuclear weapons or go into war, because there are a lot of human cost. And in today's context, there are so many, there's a huge economic cost. So, there are so many other goodwill costs. So this actually prevents country from achieving those goals. And also because in this globalization system, which has allowed country to be dependent on one another, they would try to perceive other goals such as economic growth, full employment, and price stability. So at the end, liberals, they do argue that there is a reduced military conflict and their commercial interest actually becomes the prime concern of the states. So moving further now, I'll provide you certain data to actually analyze if there is a possibility of cooperation. So first, I will analyze the arms transfer database. So this arms transfer database, I've got it from CIRP's website, and it's a collective database from the year 2010 to 2019. And this includes all arms transfer, which means it includes the international sales and gifts of weapons. And if you look at the first graph, a pie chart, you will see that in 10 years, India accounted to 66% of the total arms transfer, which was followed by Pakistan 20%, Afghanistan and Bangladesh 7%. But when you look at Sri Lanka, Nepal, Maldives, and Bhutan, I mean, it's really insignificant. But now, if you look at the second block, which only concerns the total arms transfer value of the secondary states exclusive of India, we've not added India's value. So when we exclude India's arms transfer value, the total accounts to 17,285,000. So of that, China does account to 50.03% of transfer, followed by US, Russia, Italy, and Sweden. Now, when we look at China's volume, then I mean, most of us must be strikingly thinking, there we go. I mean, yes, China is a threat because it consumes 50.03% of the total arms transfer. But sometimes it's also important to break those things and maybe look deeper into it. And when we do that, here in this page, I would only show the arms transfer from China. So here you would see, in the first graph here on the top, you'll see the most dominant lines are for Pakistan and Bangladesh. So you'll see from 2010 until 2019, the graph or the line has been very steady, but of course there has been certain fluctuation. And for Bangladesh, it actually escalated suddenly after 2018. But it is because the Bangladesh defense analyst did mention that Bangladesh had a vision of developing its arms vision 2020, where because Bangladesh also has a good amount of military force, they wanted to enhance their capability, which is why they were rigorously engaged with China in this issue. And also in 2013, Bangladesh purchased actually 2 main class type submarines. And there was huge debate that maybe China is now trying to encircle India. And also the issue was the same when Sri Lanka bought a frigate, when Sri Lanka was actually gifted a frigate from China. But actually those 2 submarines that Bangladesh bought was absolute. You could not use it for offensive purposes. So I mean, these kind of cynical views that we see in media, in academia, always try to portray somehow China as a leader which is trying to tarnish India's image in the region or trying to influence, or even there was a discussion before that is China actually seeking hegemony. But I mean, leaving those issues, we also know that Pakistan and China shares a separate relationship. So I think if we want to discuss about their arms transfer, Maybe we need to have a separate session on that. But if you look at the data of Nepal, you can see that Nepal got its transfer only in 2016 and 2017. And if you look at the graph on your left corner, you will see that of the total 54 million, only 9 million was from China. And you can see for Bhutan, Maldives, China accounts 0 of their transfer. For Afghanistan, it's very minimum. But of course, it accounts highest to Bangladesh and Pakistan. And just to let you know that for Nepal, it's the Russia who is the highest military, arms transfer partner, followed by Italy and then China. For Sri Lanka and for Maldives, it's actually India. So, you know, we sometimes need to see these kind of things when we talk about that, when we actually try to believe in this notion that China is trying to grossly involved with these countries in South Asia, and especially when it comes to military, and trying its best to actually outline India. Now, the second concept is about, I will analyze the trade database. I mean, throughout the morning, we have been discussing about imports and exports, but just here's a small number. So the first graph, it shows Nepal's total trade volume with India and China. And you would see that the graph is actually escalating for both the countries. But of course, Nepal's trade with India, comparatively, its trade volume is greater than China. And in the second, you would see that India's trade volume with Nepal and China. And you would see significant increase in India's trade with China. And of course, Nepal being India's trade partner since ages, I mean, you do not see that amount of escalation. But of course, there are different factors that contributes to it. Having said that, now when you go down and you see that China's trade volume with Nepal and India, you see similar figure that China's trade with India over the past 10, 15 years has actually jumped really high. And now we'll talk about certain indicators here. And when you look at these indicators, the first block is for China, where you see that India accounts to 0.88% of China's import. And when it comes to export, India accounts to 3.08% of China's export. And as of 2018, India was the 7th largest export destination of China. But when it comes to Nepal, I mean, Nepal's import and export with China both doesn't depict any significant contribution to China's trade volume. Having said that, when you move on to Nepal's column, you would see that actually China contributes to 10.60% of Nepal's import and only 2.71% of Nepal's export. And we can see that there's a huge asymmetric interdependence. And when it comes to India and Nepal, you will see that India is the largest trading partner of Nepal, and it accounts the highest imports and export. And both the neighbors, like India and China, make 81% of Nepal's total import and 57% of its total export. So you can see how vulnerable is Nepal here. So can Nepal actually think about that? We discussed that Nepal can actually think about throwing out China card, India card, and actually think about its survival, or rather, would Nepal think about gaining more sovereign economic independence, like countries like Singapore? You can talk about Qatar, like those countries who might not be militarily equipped, but they are economically sound, which gives them certain power to make independent decision making. So I believe that Nepal is actually seeking that. And when such is the interest, you can identify that Nepal is trying to pursue economic goals with these two countries. Now, when you move forward to India, you will see that China is India's largest trading partner. That is as of 2018. Recently, I mean, just a few days ago, I read that US surpassed China as India's largest trading partner. However, according to 2018 data, China did stand as India's largest trading partner, and it accounts to 14.60% of its total import, making it the highest import source of India after, And then, of course, regarding the export destination, it's the 3rd largest export destination after US and UAE. And for Nepal, it ranked 10th in the list of India's export destination. So when it comes to India, let us identify what is India's economical interest. Recently, Prime Minister Modi also mentioned that India is actually, in 20 years, India seeks to enhance its position from 5th largest economy to 3rd largest economy. So there is an economic interest that's hidden inside India, where we have seen in different foreign policy platforms of India that are trying to voraciously engage with Southeast Asian countries, with Central Asia, and with Africa. So there does lie an economic interest. And when it comes to China, of course, China is the second largest economic power in the world. So it would always try its best to retain that position. And if not, then it would want to grow further. As Professor Yang Xuetung argued that yes, China is trying to strive for achievement or growth, but it is not intended actually towards any other country, or nor is China seeking to be a hegemon, like with forced leadership. So these all factors show that there is a common interest, and that common interest is actually the economic interest, which can actually bind these countries together. However, a professor just mentioned in his presentation a few minutes ago that, of course, there are cultural factors too that we need to consider, which might also foster cooperation. So at the end, it is very important for the countries in this region to overcome this security perplexity. I mean, this threat notion is so predominant that we seldom try to think about the common interest that we can actually work together and foster cooperation. And the second is we need to realize each country's strength. I mean, their strength, not necessarily that we have to perceive it as a threat. And with such perception, if we actually work, then maybe there's a possibility for regional growth along with China. And then there are certain best practices, like you can see ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement. There is a Forum for China and Africa Cooperation. There is a Forum 17+1 where the Central European countries and China work together. So at the end, what I would like to say is we need to overcome these traditional theories, as Professor Amitav Acharya or Professor Yang Ching or even Kevin Dunn, they argue that sometimes these Western theories, which were developed during the Cold War eras or post-Cold War era, where things were only about great powers, maybe they're not able to address the different factors that actually constitutes the South Asian region and of course China. So maybe when we try to bring up with more theories and try to promote them among IR or among IR scholars or even in media, then maybe this can also help in foreign policy making, which would actually help cooperate these three countries. Thank you so much for this. And now if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Karki. It was a wonderful presentation. Good to hear a lot of things about the theoretical aspects of it, of the relationship, the structural, the liberalism, and how the arms control is going to redefine. But I'm sure there are many questions people would be pondering on, but just flagging a few of them in terms of, the older theories about structural behaviors and international systems is one of the aspects that is undergoing a change. I mean, we are really looking at a new structure being created. We are looking at a new world order where the behaviors would be different. And that is why I think both India and China are working for establishing new institutions and how those institutions will redefine what is the behavior of the state. We need to really look into that. And also the whole notion about probably US and China would enter into a Cold War II. So that scenario may create another kind of engagement between countries. But you are absolutely right in saying that we need to give away the past hindrances, the notions of threat, and really think about how we can cooperate. I mean, threat perceptions do lead to war. I mean, I would not say that that the older theories about there would definitely not be a war is negated. The possibility of war is not there because we have nuclear weapons. If I go to Delhi Copeland's whole theory about the possibilities of war, it all depends upon the loss of the leadership. I mean, the leadership statesman would think that how much power he or she has. Maybe that can also redefine our relations. I think we need to keep in mind that as well. And especially when US is also thinking about reviving the nuclear program, what happens then? I mean, we are talking about economic engagements, we are talking about connectivities, but these connectivities are also having certain kinds of tensions. But we need to really look at technological development, how the technologies will define our relationship. This is one of the aspects I think you would be looking at. And thank you very much for your great presentation. Now we go back to our earlier speaker. We had certain problems. So let's move to Dr. Manoj Kumar. If you're there, please go ahead with your presentation. There's a little bit of noise
It's raining
disturbance.
heavily here. Okay.
Yeah. But now we can hear. Now we
If I'm audible, I start now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Geeta, Nehru, Sabu, for getting here. And really tough times.
No, we are not able to hear you properly, Dr. Manoj. Hello, Dr. Manoj, we can't hear you properly.
We are sorry, actually there's some connectivity problem in Kerala because of heavy rains. We are trying to work it out with them. So please just bear with us.
I think we cannot connect with them. Should we move? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes, please continue.
China has invested $1 million ever since it entered into the global as the creation of.
I would actually suggest to stop the video for Manoj Kumarji so that the audio is clear. Okay. Yeah, now you can.
I think. Thank you. Paper is financing connectivity and rationale of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. China has orchestrated $1 million design since it entered into the global economy, declaring its goal as a creative economy. It is one of the successful based on economic privileges in this context. The relationship between IMF and China is viewed as a planned intrusion in the world body with considerable success in bidding its future. In 1997 and 98, of the Asian Monetary Fund (AMF), which could have control of the international monetary.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, you are not audible to us.
You may go to
Ma'am, should we move on to the next speaker because I think he is not audible.
Yes, Dr. Manoj, I don't think we can hear you properly. Is there a possibility to connect in 1 minute or what?
Ma'am, it is difficult, I think. It's raining heavily here. So I move to next week. I'm sorry, extremely sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issue. Okay, then let's move to our next speaker. Very eminent speaker we have today in the panel is Professor Shen Dingli. Although he needs no introduction, but for those who have lesser knowledge on China, he's a physicist by training and a well-known professor of international relations at Fudan University. He was the founder and director of China's first non-governmental based program on arms control and regional security at Fudan University. Also the former executive dean for American Studies. He has years of broad research and mainly focus on China-US relations, nuclear arms control and non-proliferation, regional security, export control, China's foreign and defense policy, nuclear weapons policy of China and the US. And considering that we are also having a great US-China tussle in this whole region, especially in Nepal and India-China relations, all these is quite linked, and we cannot find a better person to talk about it than Professor Shen Dingli. So, Professor Shen Dingli.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, definitely. It's perfect.
Okay, we have a good connectivity between India and China, but we do have some infrastructure challenge given the rain and storm. Thank you for inviting me. Theoretically, improving connectivity between India and Nepal is good. Between China and Nepal is good, theoretically, because it's supposed to better the local people's life, to make the communication more smooth. But there are two factors which we need to take care. One is such an improvement of infrastructure is not for free. We are not doing Marshall recovery program, which is for free. The US from 1945 to 1949 spent at that time 12 billion US dollar, which is equivalent to 240 billion US dollar today for free. So it's Americans' gift. Nobody would refuse. And even if there is some problem in the conducting of the projects, no people complain because it's free. And now, India-Nepal program is not for free. It's interest-based. First, commercial interest. India wanted the original money to be returned, plus the additional interest, which Nepal may or may not be able to repay without proper budgeting calculation. The affordability of Nepal, then India could lose money. India would be unhappy, or Nepal would be unhappy because they would borrow too much money that they would never be able to return. Another interest may be GR strategic interest. How to use this improved infrastructure to make India not only more prosperous, but also more secure. And for that, maybe another country such as China may not be very happy. If India would be better, would be more prosperous, would be more secure. Because some Chinese may still have Cold War mentality, that we compete. We competed directly in nuclear weapon, in satellites, in our march to the Mars, in our missile, in a submarine, in economic development, in chips, in gaining love from the US. We compete. And we can compete in other places. We can compete in Pakistan, we can compete in Sri Lanka, or Bangladesh, now Nepal. And some people in India may think exactly the same. China must seek interest in Nepal, commercial interest, business interest. China does not give the project for free. It's interest-based. Nepal needs to return the money. What about Nepal will be unable to afford? So eventually, China would not get the money. That would make China-Nepal relation bad. Some people in India may be happy. And some Chinese may be very unhappy. Why we should invest in Nepal, where we may never be able to get the money back? But if China were to do another Marshall program for free, if China would make a plan to give a strategic gift for free, then no people in Nepal would feel bad. Even the opposition party of Nepal cannot blame China, cannot say bad things about the ruling party. But unfortunately, this is not free. This is a business project. So without a proper calculation of the geo-economic, geopolitical risk, China may lose rather than China would gain. And Nepal may lose rather than gain. If we just go there hot-headed without a calculation, we can meet the terrorism. We can meet the frequent unstable change of the local government. And the opposition government, party would feel mad. Why you would invest? Then the ruling party, when it would be voted out to become the new opposition party, and they would be opposed to what they already agreed when they are in power. Geostrategic interest. China may see every inch of India's gain hurts China. And some Indians may think every gain of China's access to Nepal would undermine the long Indians hard working in terms of history, culture, religion, strategic preparation for a better Nepal-Indian relationship. And they hate to see. So things are not always as idealistic as we would think. Just to build a road can make the region better. No. CPEC may not improve China-Pakistan relationship, may make a China-Pakistan relationship even worse. The current prime minister, he was a sportsman. Nobody thought that he would campaign for prime ministership, and he did. His slogan, his catchword to get the votes is opposing to CPEC, kicking China out, because he believed CPEC may be ill-intended to hurt Pakistan. Pakistan may never be able to return the money, and they can go bankrupt. And the ruling party, the Muslim Union, may have been corrupted. They put the Chinese investment in the country to personal pocket. Mr. Sharif may be suspected of conducting such a kind of corruption. So he may work with China to make China's investment not to be implemented to the project. So people suspect. And China's Belt and Road project in Malaysia actually hurt China-Malaysian relationship. If China will not go to Malaysia this way, we will still maintain good relationship. And our investment in Sri Lanka actually damaged China-Sri Lanka relationship. If those Cold War-minded Indians would see China would collapse in its relationship with its friends, they should welcome China to invest a huge amount of money to Pakistan, 46 billion US dollar equivalent of Chinese money. In merely 4, 5, 6 years, Pakistan would never be able to return. So it's really good to make China's money bad, to make Pakistan's record of returning money bad. So why India should be scared by CPEC? You should welcome China to do more in Sri Lanka, and even in Bangladesh. I am a strong opponent of all these kind of things because investment too much. For a few years, we spent 400 billion US dollar, 400 billion US dollar, including 46 billion in Pakistan, 300 billion in Russia. And Japan may spend 46 billion since 1972. For nearly 50 years, Japan only spent 50 billion. And for 41 years, since China normalized the relationship with the US, US invested in China probably 200 billion. But China invested in Russia 300 billion, not in 40 years, but just in 5-6 years. Russia, I'm sure they would never be able to return the money. So why would give them money? It's not a gift. If a gift, we need to be careful. It's not a gift. We want the money to return, but they will not return. So first, we should not do. Second, we damage China's own interest. And we hurt our friends' interest because they cannot return the money. Without making their government accountable, the spending of money transparent, without calculating the local corruption and regional instability and terrorism, how we can spend the money in such an imprudent way. So for those Indian friends who hate China, you should welcome China to damage itself by doing this. In Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Malaysia, China is harming itself. Even Mahathir would return to beat his student by kicking China's project out. So this is the facts that is not in accordance with our theory. Building infrastructure is good. Only building good infrastructure is good. Not building all infrastructure is good. What is good infrastructure? Xi Jinping has said, 共享, consulting together, 共建, building together, and 共享, sharing together. So first, 共商, consulting together. When we do this in Nepal, we should not only consulting with the so-called pro-China party. We should have a national referendum. All parties, including those so-called pro-Indian party, to vote together. Let their parliament to be fully informed whether they should spend their future in such a way they should borrow money a lot, and with great possibilities they will not be able to return money. So China should not only win the friendship for this Nepalese government, we should make the next Nepalese government, which may be pro-Indian, to love this project, because they have said no before deciding to do it. Therefore, if we can get a national consensus from different political forces in Nepal, they say yes, and they have a stake, then our project is safe. We should develop the project not with an aim to undermine India. Nepal deserves to have a long cherished friendship with India. Nepal should never build its relation with China with an aim to compete with India. That would make some Indian people unhappy, with some pro-Indian Nepalese people unhappy. China should never do it. Therefore, another Xi Jinping's element, 共商, consulting together, is to go to India. My friend, I have a plan. Could you tell me how I can do better? If you don't want me to do, what's the reason? Could we do together? I spend 70% of money, you spend 30%. So eventually it would be three-party project. So India would have a bigger share and India would be informed what's going on. So India can veto. Let's have anything China would build in India, in Nepal, we should keep India in mind, not to make any Indian to feel this project would have a geostrategic purpose designed to undermine Indians' interest in the country. That would make the project more challenging because India can say no. But if India would understand China does not want India to perceive China has a visual intent, then India may feel more relieved. And if India were to do its own project, could India consult with various parties in Nepal? So not just pro-Indian party would do it. When this party would lose power, next government, which may be pro-China, would still carry on. They would not switch to China. So seek domestic political consensus before investing in the project and come to China. Do you have any opposition to my project? Could you co-invest, spending 30%? Let's make a joint venture. Let's make a road which not only serve Nepal and China or Nepal and India, but amongst Nepal, India, and China. If Nepal would build an airport, China may design, India may provide some money, and Nepal may get some other resource, transparent. I hope Modi and Xi Jinping would have their next meeting to have such a principle. Never do our own infrastructure project in Nepal alone. We should always consult together, to do together, investing together, sharing together, and improving together. Therefore, no space for China-India to compete in a vicious way. We not only say it's a win-win, Nepal win, China win, we should do win-win-win. Anything between China and Nepal would automatically serve India's national interest. Anything Nepal would do would not have any element to undermine China's interest. China would have only economic interest. China would have no strategic interest. And China should open its project. This is not happening in Sri Lanka and in Malaysia, in Nepal, in Kenya. That's our weakness. So eventually, the current opposition party, once they become the ruling party, they would do something damaging to our project. And China has rich lesson already. We should not let this repeat in Nepal and any other place. So I have my own view regarding CPEC. To every following is a future CPEC project while consulting with India. My friend, I will do this. Do you have any different opinion? Tell Pakistan, I have a right to invite India to join the project. And India, if would welcome to do a project in India, India may open the bidding a railway, fast rail, not only to Japan, but also only to China. And China may also bring Pakistan together. So this way, we would have more, we are more considerate. We are more sympathetic. We are more transparent. We are more accountable. And we truly transform our current relationship based on two-party relationship and only the two ruling parties relationship to become two people's relationship and eventually three people's. So this is what I want to say. Our design of the project is deeply flawed, because we never care their opposition. We never care how India would think. That would automatically confirm those Cold War hawks in India. Look, this is a vicious China. We may not be vicious, but we do everything to prove we are vicious. We should never do this again. And I have proposed a way, engage India before launching a new project in Nepal. and engage India before launching a new project in CPEC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shen. Very good suggestion that we should not have vicious, thinking to have any project in any of the third countries. Rather, we should be thinking about 2+1. I mean, India and China should cooperate in Nepal. We should really be thinking about having, cooperation in all projects and consultation. Especially a very interesting point is of transparency. I mean, most of the time, the suspicion or the threat perceptions come from the non-transparency. I mean, we are not able to understand what the Chinese are doing in Nepal, what the Indians are doing in Nepal, what Indians want to do in China, what the Chinese want.
Even the opposition party does not know what's going on. That's why Mahathir was very unhappy with what his successor is doing. Wrong. We should have talked to Mahathir because he could return, and then he could kill the project. So such kind of opaqueness, lack of transparency, exactly make others to feel suspicious, to provide a weapon to them. That's not smart. I finish.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very important point because when China is dealing with the democratic countries, especially Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, even Maldives, as you mentioned, all these democratic countries have a rotational kind of power. The parties definitely are not stable parties. There would be, the other parties, the opposition parties, which will come into play. And having a national consensus in Nepal for any kind of the project is a very, very good idea. I mean, I don't think that has been floated by many of the speakers out here, that any of the connectivity projects which Nepal wants to take, and there are hesitancies of whether they can repay that or not, whether there are concerns about debt trap or things like that. You can always have a national consensus. You can have a public referendum to see that, this is a good project for us and how we need to go about it, whether other countries will support or not, whether India will support or not. I think we are over with our presentations and we just move on to some question answer sessions. And I could just see one or two questions coming. Say, for example, Nehal is asking to Hindu Karki, can we consider to look at the relations from the constructive theory?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, I'm not constructivist myself, but I mean, when we look at different scholars, especially even from South Asia, if you look at Atulya Rashid from Maldives, and then if you look at Anik Chatterjee or even Shivashis Chatterjee, they discuss a lot of South Asian region and of course their interest in China from a constructivist perspective. But again, scholar like Anik Chatterjee, he poses a question that was the Kashmir problem shaped with ideas, or was it because the events unfolded suddenly after partition of India in 1978? So should we consider structural factors also? Because when we just talk about intersubjective ideas from constructivist perspective, sometimes it's very hard to measure them. And when such is an issue, we don't know if it is idea that precedes matter or matter that precedes idea. So there's always a big space for gap, because even if you consider like creation of SAFTA, do we think like one day these countries sat together and they thought they had an idea, okay, let's create SAFTA? Or was it because they thought that maybe economic interests are important, or national interests are important? So sometimes it's very hard to let go these material things that shapes the international system. But however, when it comes to security dilemma or creating security community, of course, there are certain scholars who do preach for the ideas of constructivism in creating these notions. And they also think that it is because of that countries can find mutual interests too. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I can also pose another question to you. When you're talking about, the relationship in terms of liberalist, in terms of structural theories, how do you place, the small states, especially Nepal, into this whole paradigm of relationship? Because most of the time, the theories talk about small state taking a shelter under one country, especially, I mean, there's a notion very clearly stated as Nepal taking it India's shelter, or engaging in multilateral forums. But multilateral in the present context is almost a gone theory. I mean, every state is dealing on a bilateral level, even if within the framework of a multilateral forum. So how do you look Nepal into that context? Yeah.
Well, I think, yes, of course, I totally agree, Professor, that there has been a lot of notions saying that Nepal is actually seeking shelter, or even like trying to find whenever there's a possibility to reap benefit. And I also think that Nepal actually being a very small state, it is, I mean, one of the professors before did mention that it is not that Nepal should actually seek alliances, but it should actually seek an opportunity more, because being a small state, it's everything, it depends on how much benefit can Nepal get from both these neighbors. And it is for sure that from history to different current foldings right now, Nepal would not benefit if it only aligns completely with one country, like we call bandwagoning. It's not a possibility, because we have been, of course, like if you look at the trade data that I showed you, but of course there are so many other factors in which we are completely aligned with India, but there are incidents that have unfolded and that has put, of course, Nepal to consider that maybe it wants to maybe break out a little bit from that aspect. But that doesn't mean that we again go to China and again, you know, like go through the same process, that we again align with China, and then again, it's a complete bandwagoning with China where you again have to lose your autonomy. So the challenge for Nepal is, of course, there's bargaining taking place, but the question is, where do we have to lose less of our autonomy? And I think when that place Nepal finds perfect, Nepal actually would make those kind of foreign policy decision makings. That's what I think.
Thank you. I would also like to question Professor Shen Dingli about, you know, if you see in Nepal, what is happening is, you know, a greater debate about US MCC project in relation to China's BRI, you know, MOU, which they have signed in terms of the railway project. And there is a lot of tussle of this MCC project. I mean, there are voices for it and voices against it. How do you see this US-China relationship playing in Nepal, which may influence India-China relations as well?
Well, I think China, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, okay. China-US are competing everywhere. And I see no cooperation between China and US in any area. So the two countries are confronting over Taiwan, South China Sea, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and 5G, and Huawei, everything, and in various regions. So I think US has a deeper suspicion China is pursuing an expansionism approach by dumping its surplus production first, then sending its military, its navy abroad to protect its belt and road. And finally, China would have more than one overseas base. We have one in Africa. Probably after a few years, we would have 10 in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in other places. So US think this is China's strategic expansion, which may eventually undercut American freedom of action, like a freedom of navigation. The artificial rocks China made in South China Sea is another indicator of such a China's strategic venture. So I think India may think similarly. Why China would build this island? Why China would go to Nepal to spend so much money? Because such a project are not economic, not economic. If China give as a gift, then it's great. Probably India cannot compete. It's not a gift. Nepal owes a lot of money to China. Pakistan owes a lot of money. Probably Pakistan has already owed 25% of its annual GDP to China. For this, Pakistan cannot return over the next 20 years. Therefore, it has to listen to China to do whatever China wanted to do. Pakistan would do it anyway, but Nepal probably not. But after owning a lot to China, they have to rent a seaport, which is Sri Lanka for 99 years, or another country would rent another thing. So this may be China's strategy. Spend lots of money and not as a gift. Others would owe a lot of money And finally, the generations of future people and the future government have to follow China strategically. And I think Japan thinks this way. India thinks this way. And those anti-China people in Nepal think this way. And America obviously thinks this way. And in my humble view, China may not intend to do this. But China has its own political system design. Our top leader would say something, then the state-owned enterprises will do it in 2 years, 3 years. They beat each other because it's not their personal money, it's the state money. But after 4 or 5 years, they know they cannot get money returned. But no corporation leader would be accounted, would be sued. Why you do this without a risk calculation? So China may not have a vicious heart, but China pretend to have this. That's very ridiculous. So finally, China dig a trap, a debt trap, not only for the recipient country, but also for itself. Because eventually, not one country, 70 countries. China has delayed the deadline to return those Belt and Road money to China because of this COVID. China did not waive the debt. China delayed, but very likely after another 3 or 5 years, they still cannot return. Then China would write it out. So in my view, this is not China's vicious plan. This is China's ill calculation of the affordability, of the returnability, because we want to please the leader. Leader will be happy. Great, so much money spent. He did not know this money cannot return. If we would have a system, any corporation leader and any banker, if they would ill calculate, and they would create a situation China cannot get money returned, even after their retirement, they would be sued. They would be sent to jail. Then China would do far less of this. So China would have far less chance to pretend to be vicious. I'm sorry, my government is very foolish. It pretends to be vicious.
Thank you, Professor Shen. It was very interesting to hear your thoughts and comments. I think we are running out of time for all the presentations, and we missed 2 of the presentations. If somebody has any questions, they can just ask in the chat box or whatever directly. Any speaker who wants to raise questions to any of the 2 speakers?
Yes, Professor, this is Simkhada.
Yes, Ambassador Simkhada, please.
I was very impressed by the excellent presentation of Professor Shen. As you know, there is an ongoing discourse as to what motivates interstate relations in terms of cooperation. And of course, ideally, it would be good if we can take the political differences and strategic differences aside and focus on economic cooperation. I don't want to get into that very long debate, starting all the way from the time of classical liberals to the Marxists, to the nationalists, to the realists. What I'm really interested in terms of looking forward, is given some of the difficulties that we are facing in South Asia, and especially in terms of the relationship, very, very significant and important relationship that we are discussing today. As I made clear that this relationship of India, China, Nepal, perhaps is one of the most defining relationships of the 21st century. Because in many ways, how these relationships proceed forward will not only affect India and China bilaterally, but in fact, the way the global political order, strategic order is evolving in this region, it will have a very significant impact on that. And of course, it will impact the region. So in that sense, I wanted to touch base with Professor Shen and see if there is, the nature of threat. One of the lessons that COVID has taught us is now the nature of threat in terms of international relations that we used to look at historically have changed. Today, if America and Russia come together, for instance, they have enough capacity to destroy the world several times over by their nuclear arsenals. And yet, what are we seeing? Such superpowers are looking powerless in terms of this tiny little virus. So in that sense, is there a possibility, China, the COVID-19 started in Wuhan, apparently, reportedly. Then after that, it spread many places in the world. But China has very effectively, because of its very effective governance process, has been able to limit its spread and of course come out of this, and already reports are saying that Chinese economy is already on the way, on the track to growth. So whereas the other parts of the world, and especially India and Nepal, we are suffering tremendously in Nepal now. So in that sense, is there a possibility of China extending a massive sort of support to South Asia, and especially in relation to India and China, India and Nepal, to collectively address this problem by exchanging our experiences, as well as, developing. President Xi Jinping has very rightly said that if China develops the vaccine, that it will be a global good. So in that sense, is it possible, does Professor Shen see the value in this kind of a sort of joint effort to address this immediate problem, which would create a sort of kind of a confidence building process for future other things, especially in relation to India and China? Thank you very much.
Shall I respond? Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing your thoughts. I totally agree with you that China should share its experience and physical strength with our friends in the region and beyond. But one thing probably you don't want to repeat, because we may be a less democracy, and India is a full-fledged democracy. But at the time of COVID, it looks like a less democracy might be more effective, because they have one party, they have one authority, and people care to live. They are scared of death. So a leader would tell people, stay at home for several cycles of 2 weeks. And we spent 4 cycles of 2 weeks, from later January to later March. So eventually, we are very successful in containing the virus at home, at the hospital, so they don't get a great chance to spread. I think many democracies really have difficulty to do it. American people, when those Black Lives Matter, the colored people, black people come out, they don't wear mask. You can go out, you should care others' life. Not only Black life matters, all life matters. If you don't want to live fine, you should wear a mask. Don't hurt other people, other black, other colored, or Caucasian. They don't have idea because they are spoiled by democracy. I think this is their culture. China has no way to ask Americans to do what we do. They don't want to do our way, and we don't want to do their way. Even China's approach, India may think it's great, it's effective, but I think probably many Indian people don't want to do this. So for this, I doubt if we can make others to follow our experience. But Taiwan is a democracy. They did tremendously well. Only 7 Taiwanese died of COVID. And they have a population of 23 million. That's a tremendous amount of success. So some democracy could also do well. So I would say India and America have no excuse that you are democracy, you deserve not to take a more stringent governance, more effective governance to contain the virus at home. Having said this, I do think since Xi Jinping already said, if we eventually commercialize the vaccine, we succeeded in developing it. I know we have succeeded in phase 2. We will turn to phase 3. And some Chinese government would send them abroad, those officials or company delegates. So they have already been injected with vaccine, 2 doses, separated by 28 days. And this will be effective for 1 month. So China has made some success. After the third period of test, probably China can eliminate the 4th stage, then it will be available. Xi Jinping said, Africa first. But then I would say, I cannot offend Xi Jinping. I would say, India second, Nepal third, and Dingli fourth, Xi Jinping last. I do hope China would do this. This would win tremendous amount of love and trust. People initially have lots of suspicion if China researched it, developed it, or if China has inadvertently released it, or China has intentionally covered it up, whatever. If China can share this free of cost, we just give it for free. And I think many would believe China is the savior. And they would forget China's the suspicion about China. They would give China embrace. So I only hope China would do it quickly to beat America. America is also doing its own second phase. They doubt the second phase is safe or not. I think that makes sense. But let's do the third phase. So Africa, India, America, China, everybody, we would be secure. So next January, I can go to Delhi, which I love so much, again, for the Observation Foundation's annual meeting. I have been to that meeting every year, but most likely next January, they would not have the meeting because of COVID. But if we have vaccine, I would inject a dose, then go to New Delhi. Thank you so much, Professor Kochhar and Ambassador. China, India should forget about our past suspicion. Many unfortunate, unhappy events, like the recent fist fighting. I humbly apologize to all my Indian friends for this. Please forgive China. Let's withdraw our soldiers and officers from the region of conflict to create a demilitarized zone, to create a buffer zone. Therefore, we can see each other. We would never beat each other with our fists. And using COVID as a great opportunity to rebuild our trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shen. I think we have certain comments which are coming from Dr. Shri Govind Shah. Before I actually announce that, I think there is a breaking news saying that Russia has already just, developed the first COVID vaccine, and Putin's daughter is the first one who has taken that vaccine. So I'm sure you all will be interested in knowing all of that. Anyway, so Dr. Shri Govind Shah is talking about, India and China should work together to conduct strategic environmental assessment of connectivity projects in ecologically fragile Nepal. All these projects have serious ecological and environmental issues, and I do agree with him, because this would have a long-term implications for our life, for our new generation. And already we are facing the global warming, the climate change, and things like that. And he's further saying that the strategic assessment is done at the policy level, and it is right time to do so. These proposed policies are at policy level. Manoj is also talking about the webinar looks more optimism in dealing with strategic relations between India and China. Anyway, so with this note, I think we have a good discussion. I'm sure many of you have more questions and comments and thoughts, but I think we should, you know, end to it. Maybe we have an early end out here, which is a very good sign in one sense, but we are sorry that we lost one or two speakers who could not join us because of internet connectivity, and Professor Lujabe was in hospital because he traveled to certain places, and when he came back, he had to undergo certain you know, checkups. Anyway, but whatever that one or two speakers lost, overall we had good speakers, we had good discussions, and there is a lot of hope that is still left, in the sense that we need to really think about the projects that are working. There is some sign which India and Nepal has shown after a lot of low level kind of relationship with a lot of what you say, cold, you know, treatment on both sides. We have moved away from the border problem, and we are engaging in you know, talks over high level talks over projects relating to connectivity, to hydropower and things like that. And that's a very good sign that we are going to begin very soon. That's on August 17. Besides that, I think Professor Dingli has clearly stated, you know, we should really de-escalate. We should really not have military engagements. We should not have another violent, you know, fight at the Galwan Valley. We should really think about how these two countries, which are power giants in this Asian region, not only contribute to their bilateral relation, but also contribute to the regional relations. You know, there is a lot of opportunities which are there. I think China really offers, you know, a very strong economic, you know, resource, which is essential for many of the small and medium-sized developing countries in Asia. And if we could get that, I mean, China can be a, you know, supporter, even if not free, as Professor Shen is saying, even if it is interest-based or whatever. I mean, considering the human side of it, and considering that all the countries need to cooperate, and especially in the post-COVID world, where we have a common enemy like the COVID-19, that cooperation will be conducive for the growth and development of all the countries. We have another, you know, common enemy, that is poverty. We have another, you know, common enemy now, the climate change. You know, these are the issues that probably we need to address more frequently than just about politics or the border. I mean, borders in India and Nepal, of course, we have free border, which again are becoming some kind of rigid borders, or at least people are demanding some rigidity. I do not support that. We should be really thinking about linking borders in some ways. And I think if Nepal also can become from a landlocked to a land-linked country, that would be a very ideal situation. That would be very good for not just Nepal, but also for the suspicion and mistrust we have between India and China. Over that note, we end this, and I'll just want to give a last vote of thanks to all the participants, the speakers, especially Ambassador Simkhadaji, Professor Dingli, Dr. Shigovindji, Dr. Babaji, Dr. Rajesh Kumar, many of the speakers, Ms. Hindu Karki, Gaurav Bhattarai. We missed Dr. Sabu Thomas and Dr. Manoj Kumarji. But Professor Inshin Nan has also given a very good perspective over the cultural thing. Balasubramanian ji, he was also very good in talking about the relationship. And in the morning sessions, we also had Professor Huang, Major General Vinay Chandran ji, and you know, some of the other participants who actively participated in exchanging their views. And not the least, I would like to thank some of the supporters, Nafis, you know, Snehal and Kalati, who were really a backbone for organizing this webinar. And needless to say that we have to thank the two organizations, the NIICE and CREAT Foundation, for giving the logistic support for organizing this webinar. I hope we will have more of such discussions where we could engage in much more, you know, concrete discussions, and there would be an output of it. Maybe it is not the track 1 or track 2 level discussion, but at least as a, you know, academician, if we are able to engage, not just, I mean, with all the hindrances that we have, these virtual meetings also help us to understand each other much better. This would be one of the ways we can really think about more academic exchanges between scholars and students. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you all the participants for their questions and answers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Definitely, sir. And now I'll end the meeting. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.